I firm resolved affirmative action programs to remedy the effects of discrimination are justified. I value justice, which is defined as equality being fair and reasonable. Applied Google search's definition indicates that in order to remedy the effect of any affirmative action must first be used as fair and reasonable in that instance. For example, if a person receives affirmative action for within the context of education, business, or employment, they must be evaluated fairly and reasonably. Justice will also serve as the best value for the run because it fits into the context of the resolution entirely due to the term justified being used as a term of judgment. Furthermore, affirmative action refers to policies that take factors including race, color, religion, sex, or national origin into consideration in order to benefit an underrepresented group in areas of employment, education, and business. Affirm is defined as to uphold or prove the truth of, thus I only have to prove the resolution true. Disadvantage to the truth, do not refute that the truth exists. This means that if I prove the resolution true by meaning my only burden is the affirmative, then you vote affirmative since the negative did not do their job of denying the affirmative or the resolution. The standard for the round will be promoting positive discrimination. This is the best standard because affirmative action is something that needs to be promoted and occur. We are able to promote positive discrimination through the context of fairness and reasonability as long as people are considering affirmative action as something that needs to happen. The standard is being met. The thesis on my case is that affirmative action is justified by fairness and reasonability in certain contexts. 1. Affirmative action policies are still necessary. Elizabeth Wrigley Field, 2011. The median black family has just 5% of the wealth of the median white family, with Hispanics much closer to blacks than whites. This is one of the most important disadvantages and advantages. In other segregated schools, the majority of black students in Illinois, Michigan, New Jersey, and New York attend schools that are over 90% black and Latino, and most white students attend schools that are overwhelmingly white. That the average black or Latino K-12 student in the country attends a school in which most students are poor. Meanwhile, one of the most ballyhooed areas of progress, the narrowing gap in high school graduation rates between black and white students, has been showed by sociologists. This means that because the gap between black and Latino students and white students is narrowing, and graduation from high school is occurring more often with these diverse students, that there are not enough diverse students that can afford school. Thus, it is fair and reasonable to promote affirmative action in this context. But moreover, point 2, affirmative action is awesome. Elizabeth Wrigley Field, 2011. There is every reason to support affirmative action based on both race and class. Aside the way education is being made a scarce commodity, there is every reason to fight that too. Beneath the attack on affirmative action is the idea that not everyone is entitled to a good education, but the money is there for quality integrated schools, in the military budget, in the bailouts going to banks, in the taxes never paid by corporations, and the extremely wealthy. Any social organization that requires children to spend their childhoods competing to see whether they'll be among the lucky few to attend the right schools isn't rational. So at the time that we fight for justice and college admissions, and justice means affirmative action, we should fight for more educational opportunity for all students. Thus, this proves that there are fair and reasonable reasons to promote the use of affirmative action in order to level the playing field for people who come from underrepresented groups. But even more, point 3, affirmative action creates fairness within the system. Kimberly W. Crenshaw. Affirmative action creates a fair competition by removing the barriers that construct the lanes of women and minorities in the race towards the American dream. For example, because female business owners remain outside traditional old boy networks, they often receive only a fraction of the public contracting dollars that men do. Similarly, women and minority job seekers are frequently shut out of their jobs and trades where opportunities to go to only those who are in the loop. Efforts to ensure that outsiders have equal access to opportunities are only fair and do not amount to preferential treatment. Thus, affirmative action can be used as a tool to promote equality all over the board and can be considered fair and reasonable in this context. But moreover, point 4, affirmative action has been effective in helping millions of minorities. Scott Plouse. Several studies have documented important gains in the racial and gender equality as a direct result of affirmative action. According to a report, affirmative action has helped 5 million minority members and 6 million white and minority women move up in the workforce. There have also been a number of well-publicized cases in which large companies, including AT&T, IBM, and Sears, increased minority employment as a result of adopting affirmative action policies. This just easily proves that affirmative action, when used and promoted under the context of fairness and accountability, makes justified and positive changes to represent underrepresented groups. But also, point 5, affirmative action is still necessary today. Scott Plouse. Despite the progress that has been made, the playing field is far from level. Women continue to earn 77 cents for every male dollar. Black people continue to have twice the unemployment rate of white people, twice the rate of infant mortality, and just over half the proportion of people who attend 4 years or more of college. Without affirmative action, the percentage of black students at many selective schools would drop to only 2% of the student body. This would effectively choke off black access to top universities and severely restrict progress towards racial equality. Thus, affirmative action is successful and leads to fairness between groups of human beings and also reasonable to open these doors for certain underrepresented groups. Therefore, we must promote positive discrimination and you should affirm.
You say that the app would result in more minorities or women being able to have access to things like colleges, higher education, even being able to complete high school. Why is any of that good?
Because it's leveling the playing field and making things more fair and reasonable for all beings in the society.
Leveling the playing field is something that you've mentioned several times in your 1AC. Am I correct that the way that you think that we should do this is by bringing those who are oppressed up to the status of those who thrive in the status quo?
We're not rising them to this pedestal that's like minimizing any chance of a non-underrepresented person getting this chance, right? Like, what's going to be happening?
No, I understand, but the methodology of the 1AC is one in which the dispossessed should be given access to the tools at the top of the hierarchy, right?
Okay, whatever.
Okay, one of your major contentions is fairness. Fairness for who and from whose perspective?
Hold on, which contention are you talking about?
The very top of the 1AC, you say that justice is what is fair and reasonable. Fair for who and from whose perspective?
Oh, are you talking about, my definition of justice and then how that, like, links to...
Yeah, you say justice is fairness. Well, fairness for who?
It's fair for everybody in the situation. It's fair for the underrepresented minority, whoever they may be. It's fair for the business person or the, administrator or whatever, because they're creating diversity with
Why should
students.
we be fair to the businesses that have systematically denied opportunity to minority communities?
Well, no, it's only fairness to the people that are using affirmative action because they're promoting diversity within the workplace and stuff. Like, we shouldn't be giving any fair benefits or whatever to people that aren't promoting affirmative action. Like, that's the entire point of the case, is that we're trying to be fair and reasonable.
Who's
by, we as in anybody conducting themselves using affirmative action. I just say we as, imagine I'm some, business head and I'm trying to promote affirmative action to create diversity and shit.
You have noted that persons of color face increased violence compared to their white counterparts, have lower access to education, rising poverty, higher HIV rates, etc. Why does that exist now?
Are you asking me if I'm aware of that?
No, why? Why does it exist? Why is there inequality in the system in the first place?
Well, if you want my Mexican narrative, growing up, I always faced the oppression of the white man and everything that he put me through. And I mean, I'm not black. I don't have AIDS, so I can't speak their story.
But where does this come from? It's not handed down from nothing.
I don't know, but it's obviously there since you're reading some sort of statistic or something, right?
Right, but it's not about what it is. I want to know genealogically where does it come from.
I'm not a mind reader. I don't know why these people are getting AIDS. Maybe because AIDS was spread through them, through another person. I don't know what's going on through that person's mind. Since I do not have AIDS or HIV and I'm not black.
Okay.
I don't understand.
NCAC. Ready?
Yeah.
Modernity is structured around a paradigm of anti-blackness. The grammar of suffering is parasitic on the middle passage where blacks became a site of fungibility and inferiority, being socially dead, expelled from humanity altogether. The slave's central value lies in his or her usefulness. He or she has nothing but an appearance, only a body that the colonizer master can cheat upon and use as needed. Affirmative action programs are a ruse to discern the most valuable slaves from those who can be discarded. Anti-blackness is a structural position which codes the current libidinal economy. To be white is to be desirable, to be black is to be undesirable. The anti-human attempts at reform are illusory destruction of the current paradigm of modernity is the only ethical solution. This is Woods in 2007. As a result of slavery, the concept of freedom was developed through negation and freedom of violence against the black bodies to recondition the formation by the modern bourgeois state Africa. As a concept remains the metaphor through the West sees itself, Africa thus becomes a site of lack or absence of non-being for the West. The non-beingness is precisely the essence of the slave formation. The slave and the slave formation are figures in place without history. The slave's value lies in his or her usefulness, relationship to humanity, and slavery is therefore a structural position marked by usefulness. The master settler of the world used black to establish what the modern world was formed through the aggression towards blacks so that a white would not be white. The official sanction against this violence of the bourgeois democratic culture turns this structural intentional violence into impermissible knowledge. This dual terror of the violence and its denial is at the heart of the colonial project. The double inscription of the level of ontology, of beingness ontology, once it's finally admitted its living existence in the wayside, does not permit us to understand the being of the black man. For not only must the black man be black, he must be black in relation to the white man. This sadistic aggression is violence that destroys the possibility of ontology, because the position so black with an infinite, indeterminately horrifying and open vulnerability. To be black is to be anti-black in a world that's subhuman, making normatively a function distance away from blackness. My stance is one of pure negativity towards the status quo and the resolution and the 1AC. The very possibility of ethics and freedom resides in a rejection of the way civil society operates rather than try to reform the system. We must accept that state modernity cannot be redeemed. Reject the affirmative piecemeal reform in favor of complete rejection of the anti-blackness paradigm, which describes the status quo. Colocus and 11. A sense of agency, resistance, presupposition of institutional imperatives or encounters with radical critique of underlying terms of the state which ratify, naturalize, and invisibilize anti-blackness. State and society are inherently unethical rather than redeemable. Thus, any struggle towards service rigor remains an unflinching critical analysis rather than inflation or explicit ratification of the institutions. And the terms upon which they are predicated, top of faith, has potential to open up the door to investigation of viable freedom, necessitates the acknowledgement of loss, the history process of humanization, anti-blackness, acknowledgement of the world wounds cause as well as its persistence rather than being optimistic. Any realistic stock can be taken towards reimagining the world product of imaginative devices that resist without not knowing the imaginative device exists for the sake of survival. To what end does the ghost of slavery incite the hopes of transforming the present? These projects attempt to rewrite African Americans as being integral instead of outside the dominant narrative, trying to write that as a narrative of progress once we have left slavery behind and have ascended to a space of constitutive normativity, then trying to underline the fundamental and unending nature of slavery, a kind of rejoinder to uncritical narratives that attends the subject space of social death. The alternative is to reject the affirmative as an act of burning down the structure of hierarchy that produces violence against the slave. Freedom is an illusion created by the shackles of civil society, and abandoning the pursuit of equality is the only way to break down the way that whiteness maintains itself. Farley in 2005. What is to be done 200 years ago? The slaves in Haiti burned down everything. We have the right to burn down what cultivate, because a man has a right to dispose of his own labor. The slaves burned down everything because everything was against them. Everything was against the slaves. The entire order which they were positioned, every plantation, everything. Unfortunately, they only burned everything in Haiti. This was the greatest and most successful revolution in history. Instead, the slave power in the United States now threatens an entire world with the death that it's become, and so that there's nothing but their chance to lose. They would escape slavery within the entire world. The slave begins not as a death ring, but an end. We are trained to think that through the progress of the narrative that takes up from slavery to the progress of slavery to the end of history is the progress of white over black to white over black to white over black. Again and again, the slave perfects itself as a slave by offering a prayer of equal rights. The system of property is a plantation. The system of law is a plantation. These plantations, all part of the same system hierarchy, produce white over black. Slavery is death. Slaves are not born, they are made. AC. The flippant disregard and the cross-examination of the AC is in fact a link argument to her assertion that we have to ignore history, that we cannot know why the structural problems of racism exist in the status quo is something that whitewashes over the very history of chattel slavery that can't explain these things. For thousands of years, black people were imported from Africa, used as slaves, their backs broken, their families destroyed, their women raped, their children sold into slavery, everything taken from them, and then we expect in 20 or 30 years, once integration has happened, that the black body will simply re-emerge into society. But this ignores a fundamental hierarchy or a distinction between the ability of the black body to ever become equal to the white body, because the entirety of society is founded upon that very racial hierarchy that existed hundreds of years ago, but has perpetuated itself to this day. Slavery did not end just because of the Emancipation Proclamation, but rather has been reintegrated into the system in the way that persons are put into cities, so the way that black bodies are organized in particular ways, that they are only useful for the white body. Fairness is a question of fairness for who and from what perspective. The 1AC is a one-size-fits-all solution that says fairness can apply to everyone. It's just what's ever good for everybody. But this is a completely uncritical examination of the way that race exists in the status quo. The white person is never the fairness for a white person will never be equivalent to fairness for a non-white person because of that type of racial hierarchy that exists in the status quo. Now, race, class, sex, she lumps these together in the 1AC, but they should not be considered a simple synthesis of individual effects that happen in the status quo, but rather as part and parcel of a paradigm of anti-blackness that marks and makes up the status quo of modernity. Everything that happens in terms of these types of racial oppressions comes from a system of hierarchy that is in of itself systematic, which means it's not simply an issue of throwing a couple dollars at someone in the inner city and saying that's going to fix racism, but rather is a total structural analysis of the way that we've come to know the world around us, the way that we organize ourselves in terms of not only schooling, but in terms of government, state, institutions, civil society, etc., which means that her 1AC does not go far enough, but that I have a methodological distinction which indicates our position, or my position, is completely distinct from hers. There's no possible permutation, there's no coupling of these arguments. It's a question of whether or not you should take someone on the bottom of the rung and bring them to the top, which is the 1AC, or if you should destroy the ladder altogether. My argument is not only a solvency deficit to the 1AC, but also internal link turns any solvency, because it whitewashes all of these alternate causalities, all of these other reasons that racism exists in the status quo. Unfortunately, giving someone a college degree does not stop racial slurs from being thrown around on television or the KKK from going up to someone's doorstep. Now, she whitewashes history as a data point. I've already made that argument, but independently, this flips the app because it ignores the question of why this racism happened in the first place. Also have an external disadvantage, which is an impact turn to the schooling system. Schools only teach a particularly whitewashed, westernized system of thought. Consider this, that Rome is taught in most history classes for a week, so you learn about the Roman Empire, etc., but Africa is often covered in a day or a week, etc. It's a city versus an entire continent, but black thought or African thought is always excluded from Western paradigms. It's something that systematically happens in terms of a very schooling system, which means that we should not be helping people go to those schools at all, but rather defund and evacuate those schools in order to create a different paradigm of a way of coming to understand knowledge, which can include black thought into those types of systems. It's an independent disadvantage that flips the entirety of the 1AC. Now, finally, the alternative controls are much stronger internally to the 1AC claims. All of these arguments for why persons of color, women's, minorities, etc. are all suffering in the status quo is something that has not happened simply because of a lack of access to jobs. That is the whitewashing mechanism used by anti-blackness to tell you that progress is possible. Instead, you must refuse progress and burn it down.
Okay. So what is the NC saying?
That rather than try to fix modernity, the hierarchies of the status quo, we have to destroy everything.
Why?
Because there is no hope for the slave. There is no possibility of freedom within the way that society has been organized. What?
Why are you talking about slavery?
Because it is the historical impetus which resulted in the types of hierarchy that exist today.
So your entire case is like a narrative of the black slave and how we have to stop like trying to create this affirmative action ruse because we don't understand these shackles?
My argument is that slavery has not ended. What began with the transatlantic slave trade has since evolved into various different ways of organizing black bodies such that they can never, ever possibly hope to compete in a wide scale with non-white.
Like, what are examples of this slavery?
So the way that public schooling in terms of like inner cities are built in a way with public transportation such that you can only go to particular schools that can then be systematically underfunded. The government in 1960 with transportation infrastructure pushed people into those areas. Yes, public schools are slavery.
And that's not just for like black people though, that's like everybody that it
right. Anti-blackness is not like black skin, but it's a paradigm of hierarchy which destroys that which is down at its top.
Okay, and why does this mean that affirmative action is bad?
Because it is a hope narrative, which the second piece of evidence I read in the NC indicates is the exact whitewashing of history that says, no, everybody, it's fine, we got it this time. All we needed were a couple more scholarships and some jobs, and this slavery thing's going to be fine.
White people are still being treated like slaves.
So the status quo is an attempt at whitewashing as well, but the 1AC,
but it's not working,
right?
Because the public education system is still happening. We're all still slaves.
Right. All of those things are bad. You make them worse.
So then whitewashing isn't happening.
The AF is a systematic form of whitewashing that says that we can ignore or overcome history within the ontological paradigm of modernity.
But apparently it's not working since we're all still going to be slaves as long as the government exists, correct?
Yeah, that's why we need a complete and radical rejection from the ways that academics describe race, from the way that we understand political institutions, the law. All of those are just more and more plantations.
Why are you using the word plantation?
Because it is, I think, a useful term to describe the way
Do you think
that
this is a
particular
better form of
bodies.
slavery since, like, us as slaves were still being educated and treated like citizens of society, like we still have...
No, we're not citizens of society. Civil society is founded upon the uncivilized being excluded from it, which historically in the United States is the black
So
body.
what about states that don't have the public education system? Are they slaves?
Public education is not the problem. The problem is what we learn in educational spaces like high schools in the United States, which is ultimately westernized knowledge.
Can I keep asking questions? So education is enslaving us?
Education helps the enslaving process.
So like when I read a book, am I enslaving myself?
No, it's not about education in the abstract. I'm talking about the institutions of schools require, like you get government funding if you teach certain subjects, right? But those subjects are always westernized.
Are students in private school being enslaved?
Again, it's an issue not of just being in the school, but of the form of knowledge that comes from those schools.
But it's not funded by like taxes, so is it slavery?
The entire schooling system is founded upon slavery, which means that paradigmatically it must be rejected because it's unethical. It comes from slavery, which means it must be rejected.
Okay. How long do I get to talk? How long is this speech?
4.
4 minutes. Okay, cool. All right, you guys ready? It's gonna be NCAC. Okay, here's why you're going to ignore the NC completely. It is strictly talking about race. In the definition I give you of affirmative action, I tell you that affirmative action refers to policies that take factors including race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Okay, he is specifically only talking about race. He is not addressing affirmative action holistically. He's ignoring all of the bullshit that gender has gone through, all of the bullshit that national origin takes you through. He's ignoring everything completely and only focusing on slavery, plantations, and one race. This is disgusting. This is the exact kind of thing that affirmative action is trying to combat because he is focusing in on one component of one problem. He's ignoring all of the other diverse organizations and all the other diverse problems that are occurring in society, or if society doesn't exist, the world. Okay, he's ignoring every fight that the women's civil rights movement went through to make sure that women were able to get paid properly with jobs. He's ignoring that completely. This case, the NC, is disgusting. And if you vote for the negative case, you're ignoring all of the work that women went through to get gender equality, all of the work that any race had to go through. Asians during World War II, there was the Japan endangerment camps that were created by the United States. He's ignoring every other race. And if you vote for the negative case, you are misconstruing affirmative action completely. You are ignoring every struggle that any diverse citizen went through. And that's why you reject the negative case holistically. I will kick all of my offense that talks about the black race, because that is specifically what his evidence is adhering to. He uses the term plantation to remind you about slavery, about black slaves in the 1800s when shit was going down. That is all he cares about. So rejecting negative case and everything it stands for. He doesn't even actually touch on any point of what affirmative action is. He doesn't even address my definition of affirmative action. Since he doesn't address my definition of affirmative action, he can't win at all because he is not addressing affirmative action. He is just addressing black discrimination or something. So go to the AC. Extend my value of justice, which is defined as the quality of being fair and reasonable by Google search. Justice will always serve as the best value for the round because it fits into the context of the resolution entirely due to the term justified being used as a term of judgment. Extend that affirm is defined as to uphold or prove the truth of, thus I only have to prove the resolution true. Testifying to the truth, do not refute that the truth exists as being. And if I prove the resolution true by meeting my only burden is the affirmative, then you vote affirmative, six and negative did not do their job, denying the affirmative or the resolution. Extend the standard for the round, which is promoting positive discrimination, the best standard because affirmative action is something that we need to be promoted, and to curb we are able to promote positive discrimination through the context of fairness and reasonability. Extend that affirmative action refers to policies that take factors including race, color, religion, sex, or national origin into consideration in order to benefit an underrepresented group in areas of employment, education, and business. Remember, he's not addressing multiple of these parts of the affirmative action, which means he's not addressing the affirmative case at all, which means I can extend offense cleanly. So let's go to point 2. Affirmative action is awesome. Elizabeth Wrigley Field. There's every reason to support affirmative action based on both race and class. Aside the way education is made a scarce commodity, there's always a reason to fight for that too. Beneath the attack of affirmative action is that every idea is not, everyone is entitled to a good education, but the money is not always there, which means we have to fight the good fight. Thus, this proves that there are fair and reasonable reasons to promote the use of affirmative action. But then go down to Point 3, affirmative action creates fairness within the system. Affirmative action creates a fair competition by removing the barriers that obstruct the lanes of women and minorities in the race towards the American dream. Remember, affirmative action is not just the black race. Affirmative action is gender. Affirmative action is national origin. Affirmative action is like so much more than just slavery and plantations and what he's misconstruing it as to be. Do not let him get up and try to like relink to affirmative action, because you heard everything he said. When did he ever mention women? When did he ever mention the equality or the inequality that women went through, that other races went through? He's ignoring everything, so vote him down and affirm. Are you timing?
Yeah, I got 45 seconds left. Okay, I'm going to go to my case then hers.
Okay.
The 2AC is a very persuasive appeal to solidarity amongst women, but I think it ignores the larger structural reasons that why the AC is ultimately flawed. Within the modern world, there is no hope for redemption of the black body. Civil society is founded on the slave as the unintelligible body to be excluded and controlled. Before that, it was the savage Native American. In modern times, it's a collection of women, races, impoverished people, etc., that are all at the bottom rung of the hierarchy. But the point is that all of this is a product of a way of thinking and a way of organizing society. The very foundations and structures that make up public schooling, the workforce, etc., all derives from a terrible form of organization that necessitates gross hierarchies and the destruction of the marked body. It's like we have a factory that keeps spitting out broken products, and the AC is frantically trying to fix every doll that comes off of the assembly line instead of thinking about changing the factory itself. This is the problem with things like affirmative action programs. It says that the system on the whole is probably okay. We just need to fix a couple of little bits and pieces here and there. But my argument is that the entirety of the system is flawed because it necessitates that those fixes be needed in the first place. You ask yourself, why is it that entire populations in the United States are in abject poverty, have low access to schools, are more at risk of violence, etc.? Those are things that don't come from nowhere, but rather have a very particular historical lineage associated to them, and ignoring that history ensures that things like fairness are abstract terms that have absolutely no value, which means I've at the very least complicated the definition of fairness, or what it means to have justice from the 1AC. Now ask yourself, fairness for who and from whose perspective? One of the problems with things like affirmative action programs is that what is fair is decided by those who are at the top of the hierarchy. It's fair. We think it's fair because we're giving these minority scholarships or things like that, which means that the perspective of the oppressed is never elevated. They are never given agency or power or control in those decisions. It is always what is handed down to you from someone else, which means that the slave has no agency. The slave not just being a black person from Africa, but rather anti-blackness is a paradigmatic effect against women, against minorities, against people who are in poverty, etc. Which is all these arguments that she makes on the NC about how I'm only focusing on one particular type of person is irrelevant. But even if I was, she hasn't answered my proximal violence argument that indicates that the black body is that which is marked. You cannot hide your skin color if you are black. You cannot blend in, etc. Which means that you are always already marked. We also have noticed that there is statistical evidence that indicates that that is the #1 most oppressed group in America, etc. But more importantly, that is an ethical question. Can you align yourself with slavery in any way, shape, or form? I submit that you ought not. Now, I think I'm winning 4 link arguments. One is maintaining the hierarchy. The affirmative action programs are a step ladder to the tower of modernity. The app says women need more access to the old boys clubs. Minorities need better college scholarships. This is a tower which necessitates the bottom rung by its very design. And the affirmative justifies this discrimination by asserting it's all fine and dandy as long as those at the bottom have a way to climb. This proves the alt is competitive because we would instead smash the tower altogether. This linked her insolvency. As long as the ontological condition of anti-blackness exists, the slave can never escape slavery because the terms and conditions of success constantly evolve to maintain oppression. 2 is the narrative of progress. There's her assertion that the world can adapt to welcome the black body is a narrative of progress that ignores the structural conditions of racism that exist well beyond the job market. High rates of HIV, hate speech, education, political violence, all of these are products of the very way the world has been historically organized, and the belief of reform necessarily requires the suppression of the implication of the history of racism. Her app would never stop things like racial slurs from being thrown around on public TV. It would only give particular persons better access to jobs and schooling, which ignores a culture of racism and a culture of sexism, misogyny, etc., which exists in the status quo. All of these root cause arguments are offense for the negative because she does not have a permutation argument or any reason why she can resolve any of this. Rather, she only focuses on material conditions, which I've indicated are illusory and arbitrary. They are determined by something much grander or more grandiose than any particular individual, which means we should only care about the particular ethical paradigm that is at your fingertips. The promise that violence can be overcome is exactly equal to an outright denial of the historical violence that has perpetuated itself systematically. The 1AC has framed out the underlying causes of discrimination, which turns solvency, makes the 1AC completely devoid of justice. Third link is civil society. It's founded on the slave as uncivilized and must maintain that dichotomy. The slave is by definition ontologically dead because life is defined in opposition to the unintelligibility of the black body. Civil society was called that because it was oppositional to the uncivilized, savage Native American who was, I don't know if you know your history, but genocided to the point of near extinction, destroyed and eliminated because it did not fit into a particular vision of what it meant to be an authentic, civilized person within that society. And fourth link argument is institutions. The very fabric of corporations of the state are founded on chattel slavery and the fungibility of the black body. From the flesh of the slave came the economic foundations of the United States federal government. It proves that it is built on the unethical back of slavery itself. Institutional imperatives construct a false sense of agency for the black body, which runs counter to the radical critique of the underlying terms of the state, which ratify, neutralize, and make invisible anti-blackness. Women I have made this very clear when the NC are also fungible, like say for example, the way that you are either an effective mother or a useful workforce, or you are destroyed or derelict entirely. Another example of this is the way the anti-blackness pumped itself into Asians who worked on railroads. It was simply a flash for trade business, but that this paradigm continues to assert itself within those particularities, which means it's not just a question of black people or black males or the history of slavery, but rather the way that that history in and of itself has influenced the way that America organizes itself today. Now, Huraf. I absolutely did not drop the definition of the 1AC. I said fairness is a question of fairness for who, but her argument is a complete whitewashing that says we don't have to take into account any particular perspective or location, but rather that fairness should just be what's fair for everyone, which first of all is tautological. It's an independent reason to vote negative on presumption, because that doesn't mean anything. Fairness is fair because it's fair is obviously circular. But second, that this is always determined by the perpetrator of racism or the perpetrator of discrimination gets to decide what is now fair. It's like a... Look, her next argument is that affirmative action includes gender, etc. All of these other things I've already answered the 1AC, but there's not an example in the 2AC for why the people who are oppressed can have agency or can take any power for themselves. They just sit around waiting for someone else to save them. Rather, we need to invoke the agency of those who are oppressed in the status quo, which is the reason why my position solves all of her arguments, and she can't solve any of mine.
Okay, order's gonna be... Okay, order...
What are you doing here?
This girl. You didn't tell me it was going to cost any money, so I got in for free.
Okay, good. Did you say you knew me?
Yeah. Your coach was like, silly Taylor.
How long is this?
3 minutes.
I didn't know you were going to be here.
Okay.
It's 2 blocks from my house and it's debates, so how could I say no?
Well, I'd do anything for this girl.
I'm
so.
gonna take prep time. Or whatever.
I totally forgot that you live in Austin.
I do, yeah. I'm like, I just got out of a job release, so I'm like, I'm showing up at this tournament. I'm going to be the most well-dressed person here, I'm sure.
He had you beat earlier, but his son's thrown in the towel.
No, he's still the tie left.
Okay. So yeah, the order is gonna be ACNC.
ACNC?
Well, like the first couple arguments I'm gonna give you can just kind of cross-flag to the NC, and I'll say that. Okay, is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember, the negative case only cares about one individual. He didn't even start throwing around terms like misogyny until I called him out about it in the like 1AC. So in the 2NR, or in the NR, God, I don't even remember these words. In the NR, that is when he only started discussing other forms of affirmative action and other components of individuals who are under affirmative action. Do not accept anything that he said. He only addressed it when I called him out about it. Remember, the evidence he's reading is specific from a white male, Marx, who's talking about being like, I don't know, like being repressed or something. Like, he was a white male. Like, I don't think he really understands what repression is, but whatever, ignore that. Okay, so 2, he only discussed black genocide, but he's ignoring the other forms of genocide, like the Holocaust or the Tamil War in Sri Lanka. The negative case is pure ignorance, and you can't turn your head away from the fact that he specifically in the NC only discussed black race, like oppression and slavery, using words like plantation, which was specifically coding into black slavery. He does not care about other forms of oppression coming out of affirmative action. But, okay, so go to where he says that he didn't drop the justice definition, and he talks about fairness and stuff, but I didn't say he dropped the justice definition. I said he dropped the definition of affirmative action and what goes underneath affirmative action. Since he's not addressing everything under the term affirmative action, which I extended, completely conceded, that means that I'm winning an advantage. So here, okay, extending the value of justice, which is defined as the quality of being fair and reasonable. Justice is the best value for the round because it fits into the context of the resolution due to the term justified in the resolution. This means that justice is the best value. So go to affirm is defined as to uphold or prove the true thought. Thus, I only have to prove the resolution true. Disadvantage to the truth, do not refute that the truth exists. This means that since he's only addressing one race and calling it affirmative action, and I'm telling you that affirmative action includes race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, that means that he's not addressing affirmative action as a whole. That means he's giving a disadvantage, but he's not disproving the affirmative case. He completely dropped drop this affirmative defined as argument. That means that I'm winning this, and I only have to extend a piece of offense to win the round. He completely dropped this. This was something I've been reading the entire round. This is the easiest way to vote. So extend the standard for the round, which is promoting positive discrimination. The best standard because affirmative action is something that needs to be promoted and occur. We are able to promote positive discrimination through the context of fairness and reasonability. Go to point 3. Extend it. It says affirmative action creates fairness within the system. Kimberly Crenshaw says that affirmative action creates a fair competition by removing the barriers that obstruct the lanes of women and minority in the race towards the American dream. For example, because female business owners remain outside the traditional old boy networks, they often receive only a fraction of the public contracting dollars that men do. This means that affirmative action can be used as a tool to promote equality all over the board and can be considered fair and reasonable in this context. Remember, his entire negative case is just a disadvantage to one piece of what affirmative action is. He is only referencing one race. He uses terms like slavery and plantations and tries to cover up that he's not only adhering to one race, but he is. This is clearly happening, so vote affirmative.